Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're looking at something, well, maybe a bit unexpected, a hidden gem in world literature, you could say.
That's right.
We're focusing on a specific poetry collection, the Emperor of Gladness, and really digging into a review of it.
Yep. Our mission really is just to pull out the key insights from this review, give you a shortcut, basically, to understanding why this particular work by Tawfiq Rafat is considered pretty significant.
And Tawfiq Rafat, we should probably establish this right away. He's often called, Pakistan's pioneer of modern English language poetry.
He really is. It's hard to overstate his importance in that context.
Yeah, because he was really shaping a voice, wasn't he? Giving expression to a new nation in English, which historically had a very different association.
Exactly. So it's a culturally rich space we're stepping into. And just to set the scene, the review we're drawing from gives the collection a solid 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay, 4 out of 5. That definitely signals quality. It tells you it's well regarded.
For sure. So, expectations are reasonably high.
Right. So, a pioneer poet, a highly rated work. Let's talk about the collection itself, the Emperor of Gladness. Where does it fit in his career?
It's actually one of his later works, which means, we're seeing his mature voice here, kind of refinement.
Okay, mature voice. And it's known for something specific, isn't it? Something about a Pakistani idiom.
That's the key phrase, yeah. It's really famous for helping develop this distinctly Pakistani idiom in English poetry.
That sounds fascinating. A Pakistani idiom in English. What does that really mean in practice? And the title, The Emperor of Gladness, does that give us clues about the themes?
Well, the idiom part, it's about how he shapes English. It's not just using local words, though that's part of it. It's capturing the rhythms, the feel, the sort of emotional landscape of Pakistani life in English, making the language serve that reality.
Reclaiming it, almost.
Yeah, precisely. And the title, Emperor of Gladness, it definitely hints at this duality. There's joy, absolutely, but also that sort of quiet melancholy that often accompanies deep reflection. It's full of observation, cultural depth, real emotional resonance.
Okay, so not just surface level happiness, it's complex.
Very much so.
Let's dig into that style a bit more then, the vessel for this idiom. How does he write? Is it dense? Flowery?
No, actually quite the opposite, according to the review. His style is described as really clear, restrained, even elegant. He seems to avoid, complex metaphors or showing off with language.
Interesting. So how does he achieve the depth then?
It seems he relies heavily on the power of imagery and concrete detail, letting the specific things he describes carry the emotional weight and the cultural meaning.
Grounded in reality.
Exactly. And that's where the diction rooted in Pakistani life comes in. Specific references, to traditions, landscapes, people. You feel you're there.
And you mentioned earlier this idea of blending East and West. How does that play out in the style?
Well, that's a big part of it. He skillfully merges what you might call Eastern sensibilities, the cultural nuances, the specific ways of seeing with Western literary forms, like the structure of the poems. It's seen as a real hallmark of, post-colonial Pakistani English literature.
Right, taking the form but infusing it with a completely different cultural essence.
You got it. It's a powerful act, really.
So beyond the style and the language itself, what are the big ideas? What themes keep coming up in The Emperor of Gladness?
Okay, so one major theme is definitely joy and memory. The review points out how the poems explore happiness, sometimes fleeting, sometimes lasting, often found in really simple things. Childhood, village life, family.
The everyday moments.
The everyday profound moments, yeah. And linking to that, obviously, is cultural identity. It's woven through everything.
How does that show up? Is it explicit or more subtle?
Mostly through those vivid descriptions we talked about. Daily life, rituals, the landscapes. It paints a really strong sense of Pakistani identity without, needing to shout about it. It's just there.
Immersive. Does nature play a role? Lots of poets use nature.
Oh, definitely. Nature and transience is another key theme. The natural world is apparently all over his imagery.
And what does he use it to convey?
Themes like time passing, mortality, the cycles of seasons. It gives the work this sort of philosophical feel, this reflective quality.
Right, the big questions reflected in the small details of nature.
Exactly. And finally, there's a strong sense of empathy and human experience.
So observing people.
Yeah, observing human behavior, emotions, but with real subtlety and depth. The review stresses his compassion. It's not detached observation, it's engaged.
It sounds like a very rich, very humane collection. I'm curious, does the review mention any specific poems that really stand out as examples of all this?
It does, yeah. Obviously, the title poem, The Emperor of Gladness itself. It's described as a layered look at joy, power, and how things don't last.
Impermanence again.
Right. Then there's one called Farewell to a Friend.
Oh, that sounds poignant.
Yeah, apparently very tender. Deals with loss and memory, as you'd expect. And the village scene is highlighted too.
For what reason?
Just for being really rich in that cultural texture, that local color. Really bringing that specific world to life for the reader.
Okay, so pulling back a bit, what does the review say are the biggest strengths? What really works well here?
Several things stand out. One is what's called a genuine, unforced emotional tone. It feels real, not artificial.
Authentic.
Authentic, yeah. Then the beautiful imagery grounded in Pakistani life. That's a huge plus. Gives it that unique flavor.
And you mentioned the language wasn't overly complex.
Right. The clear and accessible language is seen as a strength that lets the emotion and imagery shine through without, getting bogged down.
Makes sense.
And finally, that thoughtful balance between joy and melancholy. It's not just one note. It's life, really.
The full spectrum. Okay, so those are the strengths. What about potential drawbacks? Or maybe things readers should be aware of, who might not connect with it as strongly?
That's a fair question. The review does suggest that readers who aren't familiar with Pakistani culture or history might miss some of the deeper context.
Right, some nuances might fly under the radar.
Exactly. Doesn't mean you can't appreciate it, but you might not get every layer without that background. It's just something to be aware of.
Okay. And anything about the reading experience itself, the pace?
Yeah, it's noted as being slow and reflective. So if you're looking for, dramatic twists or highly experimental stuff, this probably isn't it.
It demands a bit of patience, maybe? A willingness to sit with the poems?
I think that's a good way to put it. It invites you to linger.
So wrapping things up then, how should we think about the Emperor of Gladness overall? What's the final takeaway from this deep dive into the review?
I'd say the consensus is it's a really graceful, insightful, and heartfelt collection. It gives you this powerful window into Pakistani life, yes, but also into just the universal human condition.
Finding the universal in the specific.
Precisely. It shows how profound truths can hide in quiet observations.
And Rafat's voice itself, what's the lasting impression?
The review paints him as a voice of, I'd say, dignity, compassion, and really deep observation. He sees the world with such clarity and empathy.
So it sounds like, for listeners who love poetry that really digs into cultural identity but does it with elegance and emotional honesty, this is one to seek out.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely positioned as a must-read for that audience.
Okay. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening to chew on.
Yeah, maybe think about this. How does creating something like a Pakistani idiom in English poetry actually change how we understand both a specific culture and the power of language itself? Especially, in our world today, that's always trying to balance tradition and modernity.
That's a great question. How language shapes and is shaped by culture. Plenty to think about there.